Right, good evening everyone and welcome to this meeting of the Executive. I will go through the emergency evacuation announcement, which most of you should now be able to rehearse word perfect. But there are no planned fire drills, so if the alarm activates, please leave the building in an orderly fashion via your nearest fire exit. The two fire exits through the partition doors are currently not in use due to ongoing works. Therefore, the fire exits are through the main doors of the hall or the storeroom adjacent to the stage. The fire assembly point is the island in front of the main entrance to the building. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return to the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded. Please switch off mobiles or turn them to silent. Toilets and hand washing facilities are available in the foyer area. Members of the public, while you are of course entitled to film or take photographs during this meeting, can I please emphasise to you that this should be done without disruption to the meeting and can only be done from a designated area in the public seating. Can I please therefore ask you to raise your hand clearly in the air if you wish to take photographs or film? You look as if you're already in action. Members, there is a need to use microphones during the meeting. When I invite you to speak, please wait until there is a microphone in front of you before speaking, as microphones are needed for the hearing loop and for the audio recording. These are all switched on and ready for you to speak and will be unmuted by officers for you. Please make sure that the microphone is directly in front of your mouth before speaking. Members, voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands for and then against recommendations, and will also ask for a show of hands for those wishing to abstain from voting. Good evening, members. Welcome to this executive meeting on Tuesday, the 7th of March 2023. Welcome to officers, members of the public and visiting councillors. And if I turn to first agenda item 1, apologies for absence, there are none because everyone is present. If I look to non-members attending, if I can go down the list as I see them: Councillor Stuart Wilson, Councillor Vilma Wilson, Councillor Jim Cripps, Councillor Richard Lambourne, Councillor Andy Cross, Councillor Michael Hoy. I think I've captured everyone there, haven't I? Sorry? Ah, hiding over on my blind spot, Councillor Laureen Shaw. Welcome. Right, if I turn to minutes, item 3 of the meeting held on the 7th of February. Are the minutes agreed, members? Agreed. In that case, I will sign them. Turning to item 4, to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest on items on the agenda? No. Okay. Questions on notice from councillors. Agenda item 5, there are none. Which takes us on to item 6, matters referred to the executive and reports from other committees. Members, there are 2 reports from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Excuse me, the Mill Arts and Events Centre outcome of the Community Expressions of Interest process and future operating costs. If I can turn please to you, Councillor Wilson, to give a report back from your Overview and Scrutiny meeting, which I think was a deferred meeting, wasn't it? The 23rd of February, that was deferred from either late January or early February. But if I can ask you to introduce the report. This is actually an executive report, but it was referred to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So welcome, and if I could hand over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. At the at the meeting on the 23rd of February, we had presentations from groups who'd been part of the expression of interest process, and we took evidence from them. I think the general feeling from the people from the expression of interest is from them. They thought it had not gone as well as expected from their perspective. So that is where the recommendations really come in to try and improve, hopefully, the process going forward. Do you want me to go through each recommendation or?
Yes, I think that would be helpful, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah.
What I will be doing as we go through is cross-referencing to the item 2 in the report, because specifically the 2.1 of the main report on pages 6.12 and 6.13 through to 2.8 were, if you like, summaries of the detail shown in the various tables and the various bits in the rest of the report. So I think it's important to understand how the scrutiny process worked in relation to those points. And what I should be looking for is for you to cross-reference the recommendations that you've made to the specific parts of the report, and in particular those key outcomes. So, but take us through it.
Okay, so the first recommendation came up that was the future model for the events centre is clear and be brought forward to full council for discussion. The idea behind this was that in interviewing the visitors and the people doing the expression of interest, what they felt was that from the overall perspective of the council, it wasn't clear about what we were trying to achieve. So there were various options that were available, how we were going to operate. And some of those were, to say in conflict is not quite true, but there was perhaps a lack of clarity and perhaps a little bit of unclear what we expected from the people doing the expressions of interest. And I think what members of the committee wanted, recommendation 1, is that they wanted greater visibility and greater input from all members of the council on the expressions of interest process and the future use of the mill.
Okay, and where does that cross-reference to any of the recommendations in the main body of the report? That
specifically comes from the evidence that was gathered from the...
so it's standalone and it doesn't relate...
it's standalone.
I just need to understand so that we've got some structure around this. So it's standalone...
Based on the evidence from the respondents from the EOI.
Right, so it doesn't relate to any particular part of the report. So in terms of scrutiny of the report, it's standalone, bears no relevance to the report. It's, it's a feedback, but...
And as I say, it was evidence that was gathered on the night, so we wouldn't have known about it beforehand.
Right, okay. Because, to be fair, I thought that the purpose of the scrutiny process was to actually look at the report and report back within issues within the report. So I'll turn to Councillor Ward, because I think, we've come back with a response.
Thank you. Thank you for actually giving a bit of clarity on that. I think it's important to recognise that the executive has already set out in the report, and that's on 2.8, their intention to refer any future proposals for operating the mill hall to the overview and scrutiny, for scrutiny ahead of any final decisions being taken. So it's looking at that, the future model. However, the executive is willing to accept this recommendation and refer the future proposals directly to full council, as was asked in this, for debate at such a point that those proposals have been fully developed prior to any final decision being taken by the executive. The operation of the mill hall is an executive function, and therefore the decision-making responsibility sits with the executive unless any decision is outside of the agreed budget within this report. Just as a note, in which case council would have to agree the finance, but basically We are just looking at this report, the budget and the contents in it. So as far as I'm concerned, I need to obviously to get views from my executive colleagues, but I think as far as that is concerned, we can accept that recommendation. And when we come to our own recommendations in 2.1 to 2.8, I would like just a slight amendment as far as that is concerned, so that it will read that a report be taken back to full council to review the current performance of the Mill Arts and Event Centre and to scrutinise the proposals for the future Mill Arts and Event Centre. So all we're doing, we're just going to substitute going back to overview and scrutiny back to full council.
Okay. Before we firm up on the amended recommendations, if we could just go to other members of the executive, if there's any comments or questions in relation to the recommendation coming through from ONS. Councillor Sperring.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't have any criticism or comment to make further than what Councillor Ward has, but unless I'm missing the point, I would have thought, as our leader said, there should have been some comment somewhere with regard to the recommendations that were already in the that had previously come from the executive. And I would have thought, as he said, can we collate your comments of your new recommendations with what was previously submitted? I don't have a, we can answer all your comments, but I can't find. I know this is early in the conversation, and you may well have this in hand, but I can't see where overview and scrutiny actually reviewed what was recommended by the executive. Sorry, Chairman, I hope I haven't muddied the waters or gone too far, but that's the point. And I also understand that you say the evidence gathered. I'm led to believe, and unfortunately I couldn't be here that evening, but effectively, two of the parties who have expressed interest were very aggrieved that a third party who hadn't made the final two had another opportunity to state their case. This had already gone through, as far as I can see, a scrutiny scenario, scoring and all the rest of the situation. But, perhaps I'm jumping too far, Chairman. I don't know.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sperring. Any other comments from executive colleagues before we go to Councillor Wilson to sort of sum up on the recommendation and listen, but any other comments?
No, I've got no further comments on that recommendation. I think it's...
Okay, so I should be looking for officers to encapsulate any amendments, but were you amending that? I mean, I know we've accepted it, but were you amending it in relation... We've got to get some structure around this and cross-refer it to the other... I've got two hands now. Councillor Mrs Belton.
Sorry, thank you. If I understand it, we're supporting the recommendation made by overview and scrutiny as a standalone item, and when we get to the actual recommendations from the original report, we'll amend that one to almost match it, because they're two of the same almost. What overview and scrutiny could have done was suggest an amendment to the original recommendation as opposed to an addition, but rather than muddy the water, to use Councillor Sperring's terms, I think there's an opportunity to just accept one, amend the other to come in line with it and keep everybody happy.
Absolutely, Councillor Mrs Belton. It was an early warning to say that I'm going to be looking for support from the portfolio holder for assets along with officers to make sure that we pull all this together at the end in a well-ordered fashion and try and blend the various recommendations of ONS and also the executive to make some structured sense of it all. So thank you for that. Councillor Efty.
Councillor Belton said what I was going to say, basically.
Right, okay. Councillor Wilson, generally happy with that approach? Yep, okay. Do we want to move on to recommendation 2? Councillor Wilson.
Again, this is one that came up in discussion, and I think, again, it will be a standalone one, but what it relates to is that the original asset delivery programme included the Mill Hall, and that was part of an overall programme, so it was tightly connected together. And what members felt was that now that the Mill Hall is in effect it's a standalone project on its own. So it was to say that the original disposal policy wouldn't necessarily follow from that, but going forward, it would, as I say, it would be a standalone operation, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it's a standalone recommendation not related to any other part of the report.
Yeah.
Okay. If I turn to Councillor Ward, do you wish to make a comment in relation to that recommendation?
Again, yeah, thank you very much indeed, Chairman. Firstly, I think there's a slight mistake in regards to the recommendation itself, because there's no document titled the Asset Disposal Policy whatsoever. But we believe that the ONS committee are referring to the Asset Disposal Framework. The Asset Disposal Framework is not just for disposing of assets through sale. An asset will be identified as suitable for disposal and surplus to requirements if it cannot evidence how. It meets at least one of the objectives outlined in the asset strategy in its current condition and use. Therefore, the Council cannot simply disregard the agreed policies of the Council, and therefore this recommendation is rejected. However, the Council remains committed to exploring all possible operating models as contained within the report, and it's a shame that nothing was highlighted that would refer this recommendation to what is actually in the report. The report covers a lot, and this seems to have no relationship to the report. Sorry to say that.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Again, coming back to any other members, do you wish to comment? Councillor Sperring.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Going back on the wording, as we've talked about, I think we ought to make this very clear very early on in this meeting. There is no plan to dispose of this building. I'm sorry, that's why we're here. We're looking for the way ahead. I think we might have to say this a dozen times tonight, but that is a simple reality. We're not here to dispose of this building. We're here to work out the best way and the most structured way ahead. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sperring. Anyone else? No, I mean, I want to emphasise that point, that the framework applies to the whole of the council's estate, and disposal doesn't mean get rid of. It actually means find and re-engineer, reinvigorate, recycle, and actually find a community use for a number of our buildings. The best example I can think of just off the top of my head is the Clements Gate Pavilion that sits adjacent to Clements Hall Leisure, which, you know, has been repurposed. So I think we just got to be, I need us to be precise, because this is a governance process we're going through. I'm not wishing to sound pedantic, but at the same time, I think clarity is important. The asset disposal framework is actually for the whole of the estate of Rochford District Council. The asset delivery programme, of course, covered 6 sites, and of course, we've taken the Mill Hall out of the asset delivery programme, so it's standalone. And as you so rightly say, I think we might have to emphasise that point, because it's the governance surrounding it now is quite different from how we started out under the asset delivery programme.
Chairman, if I must just clarify, and Mr. Goodman will probably be able to elaborate on this if needed, but there are a couple of club council pavilions that are undergoing involvement with community groups at this time. So whether you would question that as disposal or actually passing it to the community, that's another situation. That is ongoing in the background, may not be front and centre, but I can assure you Mr. Goodman is fully aware of 2 of them. Well, I am, so he must be.
And I should have said a little earlier, welcome to Phoebe Barnes, who's the Director of Assets and Investments. She is actually in my blind spot, but perhaps others will yell if all of a sudden she puts up her hand and wants to compliment anything that we're saying. Sorry, Phoebe, for not introducing you earlier. You are just in that slightly blind spot. As I'm looking over there. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you for that. I do appreciate Councillor Sperring's addendum with regard to the assets as a whole, because we are dealing with all the assets, and it is very good to understand. I don't want to muddy with regard to this report, but again emphasising that it goes right across all the assets, and we have got the pavilions that we're looking to hand over to community use, and some are actually fulfilling that use as of now. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wilson, I think rounding off on this one, if you're happy with this, sort of the way we're doing this.
Yeah, I am. And just for clarity, Chair, there was never any implication that the mill hall was being disposed of. That's not what, I don't believe the member who made this recommendation, that's what, they weren't trying to imply that at all. I think it was clear from the meeting that the mill hall was staying, and Councillor Ward made that clear at our meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But we have to take what is written from your committee, and there we are. So, okay. So you now understand the reasons why it's being rejected, but you know, that's not to be negative about the asset delivery programme and in relation to this building. Okay, moving on to recommendation 3, Councillor Wilson.
Recommendation 3 relates to section 4.2, and it was recommended that there be a cross-party working group set up to steer the process, looking at the high-level objectives for this. I appreciate we've got the partnership panel, and that was mentioned, but as I understand it, the partnership panel has got a wider remit, so this was specifically for the Mill Hall.
Yeah, I won't steal Councillor Ward's thunder too much, but of course this is back to governance, and the partnership panel relates to the asset delivery programme, and now by default the Mill Hall has fallen out of it. But I'll let Councillor Ward do the response.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to add and give clarity to that response, if I may. The report currently under consideration by the Executive is the ongoing process of setting the future of the Mill Hall. One of the purposes of the report going to ONS was to ensure transparency and to enable cross-party involvement. Given that the Mill Hall is no longer part of the asset delivery programme and therefore does not fall within the terms of reference of the partnership panel, the Executive will accept the recommendation to form a separate cross-party working group to support the development of proposals of the Mill Hall. But I would like to suggest just a slight change, if you would accept it, in regards that it would now read, the cross-party working group is set up to support the process. And I'm content with that if you are.
Any comments from executive members? Councillor Mrs Belton.
Thank you. During my short time on council, it's always been certainly the ambition to have cross-party working groups and have people engaged. That was always the case with the asset project, it was the programme, and everything else that I've certainly been involved in, we've encouraged, and it's not always taken up, quite frustratingly. I fully support a working group for this. It's a massive item, it's an emotive item, and I think the more people that are prepared to put their money where their mouth is and get involved, the better. I'm happy with the recommendation in its original form. I'd support a change if it's welcomed. I don't see it makes a huge difference, but ultimately I welcome support from everybody on every group so that we can get the outcome that the community wants.
Councillor Efti.
I'm also quite happy with the recommendation. It's an original form, which is to steer instead of support.
Lovely, thank you, Councillor Efti. Other comments, and yeah, I totally support it. I mean, the partnership panel has worked pretty well on the asset delivery programme, and you know, it should be there should be cross-party engagement. And without dwelling too much on the past, I have to say when the framework was first talked about in 2018, 2019, recognising we needed to do something with our estate, and I realise a number of us weren't around there, so I'm not finger pointing at anyone, there was less than cross-party engagement to address, you know, what we needed to do with our assets right across the district. So I really welcome this. And just to be clear, you say it relates to section 4, but it doesn't relate to one of the particular key outcomes.
Yeah, sorry, it relates to the 4.2, so it's the overall development of the high-level objectives. So we're beginning to, what it's saying is, Council's begun to develop its high-level objectives for the Mill Arts and Event Centre. This is based on all the engagement assessment. I think that panel would then, or sorry, that working group would support that work.
Okay, no, that's great. All right, lovely, thank you. Then we turn to recommendation 4. Councillor Wilson.
And again, that comes in section 4. So section 4.2, 4.3, and the idea behind this is that in order to get the clarity of the vision and what we expect the people doing the expressions of interest to produce on behalf of the council, that we revisit the market research, which will inform what we can deliver, what the community want to deliver. So it's not to throw the work away, it's actually to build on what's already happened.
Okay, glad you made that latter point, but Councillor Ward.
Thank you again, Chairman. Again, I think a little bit more clarity is required when we're looking at this report, because the report recommends that a budget is allocated of £25,000 to support the resources required to develop a full business case for approval on the future vision for the Mill Hall Arts and Event Centre. This allocation of budget will look to focus on resident assessment needs, engaging with all stakeholders to collate all previously captured data to formulate a proposed investment design and business case to demonstrate how the investment required for the building ensures its financial sustainability for the future. The meaningful market research data we gather will inform the future operating model that allows the council to develop that business case, as the intention will be to look at all the options, including the designs cabins proposal, which will necessitate a modern media facility, supporting a cinema-type offering, which will require significant investment in soundproofing and technology, all of which is already covered by the report. Therefore, the executive does not accept this recommendation as it is unnecessary.
Councillor Mrs Belton.
Thank you. I'm probably going to say the same as Councillor Ward, but in a few less words. To my simple mind, the sensible thing here would have been for the original recommendation 2.5 to have been amended to insert the words meaningful market research into that paragraph. And I think that's what Councillor Ward was getting at, that it's already in the report, but that the wording could have just been enhanced to meet overview and scrutiny's desire to have that sort of phrase or objective in there. Which I don't think any of us are against that. Absolutely meaningful research is what we need, and we already have an awful lot of it. And the other thing I just want to bring up, and it would have come up under 2.5, but it can come up now. Both the design cabin and the mega centre made it crystal clear that they have a lot of research as well, and I hope that part of the process will be engaging with our preferred partners to work on that data, the data that we had commissioned as a council only about 18 months ago, and then the £25,000 budget, or up to £25,000, was for anything else that we don't already have, and also to potentially join all of those pieces of data together so that it becomes something that everybody can understand and absorb. So in in refusing this recommendation, I think it's purely because the basis is already covered in 2.5, and potentially we could propose an amendment to 2.5 once we get to that part of the report to include those words, if that would suffice. And then I think, again, we're ticking both boxes.
Yeah, I'm looking at Councillor Wilson. I think I got a nod there, but
Yeah, no, it would. I think we're sort of almost violently agreeing with each other, because I think as long as the word meaningful market research, it's only because market research is different from putting a business case together, it forms part of it. So as long as that's in there, that would be fine.
I mean, I think the strange thing about this is we're wanting to be really positive, but we don't want to duplicate recommendations. And if we can combine and simplify it, that's what what I intend to do at the end of this section is to actually adjourn the meeting for a little while we actually work out, so that we can actually agree a set of recommendations rather than just debate it and start playing around with words and everything. So we're rejecting 4 as it stands, but actually incorporating it within 2.5. Is that, but the wording to be agreed, and we'll have to talk that through later. But I think to adjourn it, to give some time to work that through rather than, So, Councillor Ward, did you want to come back?
Yes, it was just thanking Councillor Belton for just adding those items. Yeah, we do have a lot of data which is shared across the board, and we do need to access as much as we can, as well as adding to that and to see where the holes are, if there are any, to make it a complete market research. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. Any other member wish to comment at all? No? Okay, Councillor Wilson, happy with all of that? We'll move on to, now this is where it gets interesting, because some people have got one version of an agenda and others have got another, but let's go on to recommendation 5, as I believe the agenda should have been published. And I think we'll be reverting back to the agenda item right at the end, the 5 at the end, but there were several versions of the agenda published.
Yeah.
I gather through a technology default or something, but we'll come back to that. But let's deal with them in the order. We've got recommendation 6 on some of our agendas and 5 on others of our agendas.
And just to be clear, that's the one that during the process, external funds...
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thanks.
Thank you for that clarity.
Thanks, Chair. So this is a standalone one that came up in discussion with the groups that had put the expressions of interest, and they were all asked whether there were external sources of funding that were available to them, and they all indicated that they could potentially have other sources of funding. So it was really just to make sure that we don't forget about those extra sources, so it's not just purely council funding.
And I think you know the question coming next. What does that relate to in the report? Does it relate to any of the outcomes listed?
Well, I think, sorry, excuse me, 6.2, which is about next steps. Upon approval of the budgets presented within the report, officers will begin discussion with Fusion. Right. I think we would be looking with the people that have put the expressions of interest to be looking at putting the full budget together.
Okay. All right. So you're linking it to 6.2 within the report. Thanks for that. Councillor Ward.
I think I'm on again. Thank you. Well, the executive accepts this recommendation. I'd just like to cover a few other things that need to be said. At this stage, it's too early to say what the operating proposals and associated governance may be and what funding streams may be applicable. It must be stated that we would always consider all available funding options as part of the financial business case, such as the Community Investment Plan Fund. Equally, we will support any partners with their own funding bids, but basically we accept this recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Any further comments on that recommendation? Councillor Efty.
Yes, I'd like to agree with this. It's always best to use other people's money legally, if we can.
Councillor Mrs Belton.
Thank you. Yeah, fully support this, and I think it's been spoken about many times, and the fact that working in partnership actually opens up a lot more doors than what councils are able to achieve themselves. So that was, I think, always part of the conversation. So to put it in the report, absolutely fine with that, that's good. Obviously, just to remind members that we have gone through the Shared Prosperity Fund, and the Mill Hall can potentially feature in that further down the line, and the Community Investment Fund, both of which create opportunity for partners, for third parties to look at match funding opportunities and so on and so forth, because I think it's always been the intention to maximise any investment into the Mill Hall to the nth degree by using those third-party opportunities. So fully support it, and in my mind this has been discussed many times over.
Thanks, Councillor Belton. Any other comments before I go to Councillor Wilson to sum up? Yeah, certainly. I mean, from top of my head, I think we've actually put in about 210,000, subject to us agreeing further recommendations that are set out in 2.3 and 2.5. 210,000 from the Community Investment Fund, I think. So, you know, these other sources of funds are important, but there, depending on the governance model that's finally selected for this place, there's probably much better opportunity than directly to local authorities on funding. Anything that you wanted to sort of sum up on that point?
No, I mean, thanks for your support on it. I think having those extra funding streams will reduce the risk to the overall risk to the council, and also hopefully enhance what is offered to the residents as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, along this long and tiresome journey, if I can say, we have actually visited a number of well-run organisations that run through trusts, charitable organisations, you know, town council in South Woodham Ferrers. We visited that facility, and they run, you know, yeah, they work very well, and you know, that's the model that we should be looking at. So thank you for that. Right, does that take us on to recommendation 6, I think, 5? 6, yeah, right, okay. Recommendation 6, Councillor Wilson.
This relates to recommendation 2.6, that the progress of the community expression of interest process and the outcome following this process be noted. And again, it came up as being interviewed with the people that had put forward the expressions of interest. And I think the idea behind this is there's a reset, so it's not really to throw the whole thing out. It's not to get rid of any progress that we've made. It's just to reset, to take stock of where we are, and then move forward. Because I think if our stakeholders have got any uncertainty and they perceive that, then I believe as a council we've got to try and sort that out.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Any comments from my councillor, Mrs. Belton?
Thank you. I don't know if Councillor Ward wants to come in first.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I bypassed you, Councillor Ward. Let you come in with your... sorry.
Aren't you naughty, Chairman? Well, at this time, the Executive can't accept this recommendation as the current expression of interest process hasn't been concluded. It's ongoing at this moment, so, you know, we can't restart anything and do anything fresh. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Mrs. Belton, your turn now.
Thank you. Right, I've been largely supportive of the recommendations from ONS, but I'm going to be honest, this one absolutely infuriated me for a number of reasons. The first one, despite some Facebook comments and some reporting, the expression of interest process hasn't failed, it hasn't finished, it's still going through. We have 2 preferred partners that have worked incredibly hard to get to this point, and they made that crystal clear at ONS, despite a third party being given essentially an open interview to pitch how it felt. I think it would be completely outrageous to start the process again, to refresh it in any way. We've got 2 preferred partners that are working with officers to come up with a model that can sustain this building and give the community everything that it wants. And I don't believe from what I heard that either of those partners suggested in any way, shape or form they wanted a refresh or a restart. They certainly want more clarity, but that's something completely different. That is an ongoing piece of work with those two partners. But I certainly wouldn't support the recommendation, and to be honest, I was disgusted that it ended up in there, to be perfectly frank, based on what I heard at ONS and based on the work that I've seen those two groups undertake for many months now. So I won't be supporting it, and that's why.
Thank you, Mrs Belton. Councillor Mrs Belton, that's very clear. Councillor Williams.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Our preferred partners, not only have they put an awful lot of time into this, they put an awful lot of money into this. And it would be extremely unreasonable for us to finish this ahead of time. So it needs to complete its natural progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other comments? No, I mean, look, I just want to underline the comments that have been made so far. You know, we're working through this, and I think it would be extremely discourteous and disrespectful to undo a heck of a lot of work. I was part of the scoring process on reaching the those two final preferred partners with us, and ongoing work. I have to applaud their patience, because other aspects of this whole project are not easy, and we're doing our best to work through, and I really want to applaud their process, their patience with us. But it would be, it's a process still going on, and it may be a little laborious, but that in itself isn't a reason to undo it and just start all over again. The criteria and the basis for the expressions of interest is as sound today as it was when we did that, when we launched that process. But I think we're all getting frustrated with the time it takes, but that's not a reason to start afresh. I think it's important to sort of, you know, we're trying to back this up with logic and structure attached to it, Councillor Wilson. Right, okay, recommendation 7.
This relates to 2.6, and it's an ongoing piece of work, really. It was clear in discussion with the people that had put the expressions of interest in that what they wanted to be involved with is the procurement and the development of the building. So they wanted to be actively engaged, for example, and Councillor Ward's mentioned it, but about the media facilities, because it's them that's going to have to make use of it. So the idea behind this collaborative procurement is that all the council plus the people doing the expressions of interest are involved in the final product that gets delivered.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I've got it right this time. Councillor Ward, your turn.
Thank you. Well, the executive will always ensure it is following the council's procurement policies and relevant legislation, and will always look at opportunities of working collaboratively with its partners. We assume, and I'm going to need clarification from yourself, that the intention of this recommendation is to consider a collaborative multi-partner bid model to operate the Mill Hall, which is something that we will consider when looking at possible operating models. And I think trying to understand what you were talking about in this recommendation, I've taken that assumption is that exactly what you were aiming at.
Yeah, it is. So in effect, it's not the council's interpretation of what the people that are operating the building need. It's actively engaging with them, obviously within our procurement frameworks, but yeah, it is a multi-agency bid.
Okay. Councillor Ward.
Yes, I'd just like to come back on that. We've still got to look at the governance, and we've still got to look at the models. And the models and the government and the governance will actually be a decisive factor in how this multi-group actually works. And I think that's the basis on which we have to explore. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Efty.
Thank you, Chairman. If we look back to recommendation 4, where we talk about a modern media facility, which is talking about cinema, that came from the expressions of interest. So we have been engaging with them all the way through this. And this wasn't our idea, it was their idea. So, of course, I'm sure we'd look at what they would want to operate.
Okay. Look, this recommendation is an interesting one because I understand the spirit of it, what it's intended to do, and it's about engaging with the working group, working party, call it what you like, that we've agreed should happen. But I have actually got to defer to officers because there are very, very strict rules around procurement in the local government world. Some that frustrate those of us that aren't in the local government world like mad. And we saw an example of that in the early stages of this where there were huge restrictions. I mean, it frustrated me like mad. And I think that awful expression, but lessons have been learnt from that. But I've really got to defer because this isn't something that in any way the executive want to be obstructive about, but we do have to follow a legal governance framework. So, you know, I've really got to look for an officer comment to support what I'm saying or reject what I'm saying. Emily Yule is, and Phoebe is very delicately sort of nodding her head towards Emily. So,
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, executive members. I think really this is a bit cart before the horse, Chairman. So until you understand the governance model around how the operating model might be delivered, you can't make any judgments on what procurement process might need to be followed.
that was very nicely and succinctly put, and you know, I think that's where we are from a compliance point of view, and hopefully you'll accept that in the vein it's intended. You know, a lot of this is carts and horses and how we do things. Happy to move on? Right, recommendation 8.
The last recommendation, and I've thought about this and I've discussed this with officers, and I'm not sure that as we're coming up to PERDA, that this recommendation would actually be viable at all to hold an extraordinary council. So I'd look perhaps to Mr. Hunkin to say, you know, is this a complete no-no?
Chairman, it wouldn't be a complete no-no, but you know, it would depend on the business which was to be conducted here. But obviously, we'd want to hear what the reply to the recommendation is.
Of course I would, Mr. Hunkin. Councillor Ward.
Thank you. The executive has already delayed its decision-making on the report due to the ONS committee's earlier deferral of the item. The report today is simply seeking the executive's approval to ensure that the Mill Hall can remain fully operational in the interim period. The executive has already accepted recommendation 1 to hold a full council debate on the future operating models before any one option is selected. That is the right time for the council debate and not now, when we are simply making decisions that will keep the building operational day to day. On that basis, the executive will proceed with the recommendations at 2.1 to 2.8 in this report, with obviously the additional recommendations that have come forward. Referral to the full council being unnecessary at this stage. So I would say that, as you suggested, it is probably unnecessary because we're already tending to this recommendation in recommendation 1. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs. Belton.
Thank you. So when I read this, I was surprised because to me it was jeopardising keeping the Mill Hall open in the short term. This report is about the interim period. It's about the period that we're currently in of just finding a way to operate it and ensure that bookings can be taken and the longevity and to staff the building essentially. So the recommendations were, some of them were slightly off-piste of that, but I understood why, because they related to other points in the report. So, I mean, I fully agree with what Councillor Ward's just outlined there, that If we were deciding the future operating model of the Mill Hall in this report, absolutely I could understand why people would want it to come straight to full council. The questionable bit about being before elections is arguable, but that's a different thing altogether. But we're not actually doing that in this report. This is about the interim running operational model. So I think what Councillor Ward said is absolutely right. We debate this at full council at the appropriate time when models and working groups have met and the expression of interest has concluded. And at this point, we're just trying to keep this building open for the public, which is what everybody has said they wanted.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Belton. Councillor Efty?
I'd probably say the same sort of thing, but in a lot less words. We want to debate new stuff, not go back over the old stuff.
Huge amount of work to be done, and we've got to have meetings where we can make decisions and move forward on some of this stuff. But did you want to come back?
I don't think it was the intention of the committee to be obstructive on that. It came about, as I recall, that members were worried that because on the key decisions document there was a key decision that had to be taken, and I think members were worried that because we delayed it within our committee that would jeopardise the future of the Mill Hall. And I think that's where this came from. So it's not something that was... it's not there to be a break or anything like that. It was genuine concern that did we need to take a decision earlier rather than later. But from what's been said, there's no need for that.
Okay, Councillor Wilson, thank you very much. Of course, you're the messenger for your committee, so you've pushed over those various recommendations very ably. But did you want to, we're still actually in your introduction of the report going through the recommendations. Did you have anything else that you wish to add?
No, thanks, Chair.
Right, okay, what about the recommendation that has got printed but wasn't recommended?
Yeah, that fell, so that was rejected at the meeting.
Right, okay, even though it got published.
It did. I think it was published in error.
Okay, look, let me be absolutely clear, because it was published, and I think it's regrettable it was published. We just end up by going around in circles with those sorts of recommendations. It's out there, so I'm going to comment on it. There is no suggestion. We've been through a process, lots of meetings. There is no suggestion of demolishing this building. Let me make that quite clear. You know, I think it's important to spell that out. What we're trying to do is make this a facility which we, as I've said in the past, which we can all be proud of, having been through quite a lot of a pain process. We are committed to that. I think I probably understand why the question might have been raised, but clearly certain people haven't been with this at an earlier stage when original outline business cases were being put, options being looked at. We don't want to keep going around the wheel. I want to make it quite clear that if anyone has read that as a recommendation, it's not a recommendation and it should be dealt with accordingly, but there is no suggestion. Social media has pumped out certain things, it's latched onto it, and I think that's extremely regrettable because social media has a duty to accurately report, as does other areas of the media, so thank you for that. Right, okay, so what I want to do really is go through the rest of the report, because Councillor Ward, it's your report. Do you want to talk about other aspects of the report, in particular the key outcomes set out on page 6.1.2?
Certainly. I would like, I think we're going to be changing a few items around, but if we were to look at 2.1, upon recruitment of staff to operate the hall, and it should be the Mill Hall, notice to be served to Fusion Lifestyle to remove the Mill Arts and Event Centre from the existing leisure contract and to vary the contract accordingly, and for the council to undertake the operational management of the building thereafter. And obviously this is an interim case. I'll go through 2.2.
Well, just let's take 2.1, okay. Otherwise, then we can sort of find out if there's any comments in relation to any of those. Certainly, Councillor Wilson, I'd like you to join in this bit because it's important, because there might be a flavour from the ONS that you can bring to any of these points. But members, are there any comments in relation to, at this stage, 2.1? But you are amending it, are you, Councillor Ward? Did you say you were amending it, or
No.
it's as written?
No, as read. I believe you did mention you were going to adjourn so
Well-
we could actually put together the recommendations.
Yep.
So I'm reading out recommendations that are going to change. And so we need to actually understand how those recommendations are going to change rather than me reading out recommendations that
No,
will not.
absolutely. Look, the point is there is an amendment because you've actually said you want inserted mill for absolute clarity in the first line. So there is an amendment by virtue of that, but it's not material in terms of the meaning.
Absolutely.
But in terms of 2.1, is there any general conversation around that point? No. Okay, moving on to 2.2. Save your breath, because we've got the report in front of us and we can read it. But is there any comment that you want to make in relation to it? You don't need to read it out.
I have got no specific comments on there. I think it's very, very important that we actually go through these items where the amendments need to go in. I believe, I'm hoping I'm going to get a nod from either Phoebe or Emily that those amendments, it's actually Emily who has made the amendments that are necessary for us to look at in regards to the additional recommendations from ONS, which I would suggest, Chairman, respectfully, that we may have an adjournment to actually go through them so we take them all together rather than me doing this piecemeal.
Right, okay. No, I agree with that, but I did ask you if you got any specific comments in relation to 2.2, which is talking about a revenue budget of nearly £250,000.
I have no additional comments on that, except obviously, like any budget, it is up to, it's not, it's not that, the amount we're going to spend. We don't know. We will be investigating everything that is necessary in regard, and this is actually in relationship to all items that are listed on there. All the finance items are up to, and we will obviously be very fiscally aware of how that money is managed.
Okay, appreciate that. Councillor Mrs Belton.
Thank you. I have previously challenged this recommendation and the Appendix 2 because of the figures that we're talking about here. Now, I come from the private sector, so when I see these sorts of figures, it makes my eyes water slightly. But what has been explained to me and what I accept is that this is an interim arrangement, and I go back to the word that I used earlier. This is about keeping the mill hall open in the short term, because in the short term we don't have private sector partners that can come in and manage the building because we don't know what the model is, we don't know what the objectives are yet. That work's to come, as we've alluded to tonight. So I can support this recommendation and the figures on the understanding that this is about a short-term option to looking after the mill hall and keeping it open. I just think we need to make that clear, because we don't know that the best operating model of this building is for officers and council staff to run it. As we've alluded to, there's options with partners, trusts, charities and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to bring that up, because on paper that is not a recommendation I would support, but I have asked the question and been given the answers, so on that basis it makes more sense.
Okay, Councillor Ward, you look at it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm very happy that my co-councillor, Councillor Belton, has come up with that. There were items in Appendix 2 which I think many of us were not happy with as far as the figures, but this is an interim arrangement, and we need to be able to be happy that we can keep the mill hall open and working until such times as a model has been devised that can take over.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. On that point, I share the general concerns, but I also accept that officers have a little bit of difficulty because they've got fusion pay rates. they have fusion pay rates, and they have officer pay rates, and they have all sorts of other pay scales, but until you actually start developing the model needed in the interim, this is a difficult one. And what officers have done is they have got some objectivity about how they have arrived at the figures, albeit, to use Councillor Belton's terms, they seem a little eye-watering. I don't really want us to go for an amendment, because otherwise we just look as if we're, but I would like officers to bear in mind this is an up to. I thought your comment, an up to figure, is the right approach. I would like to revert back to some traditional HR methods of let's have a few job descriptions around what is considered to be a reasonable operating model for the interim, and make sure that our pay rates are market rate, that we attract the right people, the right calibre of people, but I think it's dangerous when you start necessarily looking at one industry, you know, here, which is quite different from perhaps other industries that people work in. So I'm sure, officers, you've taken that on board, but within the spirit of the recommendation, I'm certainly quite happy. Councillor Wilson, did you want to comment at all? No. Okay. 2.3, Councillor Ward, did you want to make a general comment? It's before you.
Generally, it's the same, where we've actually got additional capital budget of up to 185,000. The up to is a very important factor. Again, in whatever workings that will need to be done, we have to be careful in how it's actually spent.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Mrs. Belton.
Sorry about this, but I'm going to keep saying things, because often what we don't say is what is then used against us. So I just want to reiterate some points. So again, looking at this, the first question was, why are we investing money in a building that we don't know how it's going to operate? We don't know what outside investment is going to be needed. We don't know who's going to be using it. But again, we've asked these questions, and the responses I've had, and it does clearly say it in the table 6, but I'd still like to just get clarity. These are about essential repairs. These are about leaking roofs, fire alarms, things that have to be done regardless of what is going on in this building. It is the essential stuff. So we aren't throwing good money after bad. We aren't spending money that we then need to spend again because we want to change the usage. I don't like spending money twice in any walk of life. So it was important to clarify that, but I trust and I understand now that as per the condition report and as per the officer's answers, these are the essential repairs that are required regardless. So on that basis, again, it makes more sense to me.
Yes, I mean, I think, again, it's getting the balance. I mean, I'd certainly, and there's emails on record to say that we've wanted the obvious signs of building decay understood, and that relates specifically to asbestos, which is the common question that is asked in buildings of this type, and high alumina cement, concrete cancer as it's known, and we have been assured that the building is structurally sound. And on that basis, I think we, feel confident that we push ahead. Councillor Hoy, you're nodding your head. I wouldn't normally, you just caught my eye, but we actually have those emails on file, and they are from Rick Surveyors. So sorry, you just caught my eye and I couldn't help noticing. But certainly we are talking about considerable investment in this building over a number of years, which we are committing to, but there has got to be along the way the appropriate reassurance through the appropriate surveys to give us confidence on that point. Councillor Ward. Sorry, Councillor Hoy, I wouldn't, I mean, please. Yeah, look, I can, I'm more than happy. In fact, I would be delighted to make the emails public knowledge, because I think it's a really important point that what we don't want to do. So I'm pleased, sometimes I break the rules and bring other people in if I see that they're itching to say something. But, I have always been concerned, since we've been in the latter phases of this, that we didn't hit a fundamental obstacle of a structural defect in this building, because there's no point in investing and giving a commitment to invest if we actually find that the obvious things which we talk about these days, concrete cancer, high alumina cement, which I do know a fair bit about, but I'm certainly no expert in professional terms, and asbestos. It's the limitations that those could offer. But I think actually there's probably further structural survey work that we need to also give us a degree of confidence on. But I am very happy, certainly to councillors, to make the reports available that we've had. So perhaps officers would take that as an action, because I want to give confidence to everyone. But it's how far you go to satisfy yourself on the structural condition of it. Sorry to, I couldn't help but to notice you nodding, so I'm pleased to have that clarification. Councillor Ward.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think 2.3 is fundamentally about making this building fully operational, at least initially, and I think that's a very important factor. We want to get things going, and we need to make it safe. There's a lot of items in there, in that list. I don't need to go through them. They're all listed, but they're all essential, and they are the things that need to be done as quickly as possible. And
Yeah.
I know that's why we do need to proceed with this report to enable that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and the condition survey, which has been commissioned, we are committed really for insurance purposes, all sorts of regulatory processes to make sure that we responsibly deal with those in the short term while we address the longer term commitment.
If I can also just come back on that, you know, as Emily said, and things that I've been saying before, we must put the horse before the cart. And I believe this is a twin track that I've been speaking to Phoebe about, that it is really, really essential that as well as doing this material here, we are going to need to work on the governance principle and the various concepts there might be there for the models that need to be used at the same time. Because I want to sort of move on with this to give those expressions of interest the opportunity for the conversations that we need to have.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and obviously any subsequent lease arrangements would have to reflect, you know, anyone taking on this building needs to be given the assurance, you know, in whatever legal arrangements that involves. Moving to 2.4, certainly there's going to be an amendment here because I don't recognise the figure in there, but I think it's intended to be £45,000. So that needs to be confirmed, but I think it really speaks for itself.
It does indeed speak for itself. If we look around, I'm not going to say it's the most pristine of furniture that sits around. It does need to be improved, and we need to make an investment in that so it actually starts to look a bit better. And I think that's an important factor and more inviting.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Mrs. Belton.
Sorry. All I would just like to say is that it's very vague. Furniture is quite a broad term. Whilst I recognise that there may be some needed, I would like to think that we're future-proofing, and anything that we do invest in now could be used in the future and isn't going to be something that has to be disregarded when we find our operating model. And I would also just like to add, especially with my climate hat on, and finance and economy, quite frankly, that any furniture that we no longer need gets repurposed, reused, given to the community, something is done with it. I do not want any of this to end up in landfill because whilst it might not be the prettiest, it's perfectly functional.
Well said. Right, I think in terms of 2.5, we agreed earlier that will be looked at in conjunction with the item recommendation 4 from ONS, so we can move on from that if you're happy with that, Councillor Wilson. Yeah, happy with that. We'll work on that in an adjournment. And then 2.6, Councillor Ward, did you wish to comment on that?
I believe we have dealt with that.
It's a noted one, yeah.
Yep.
And it stands as at 2.7. Any comment?
Again, more or less the same. We've actually covered that in a lot of things that we've talked about.
And 2.8?
Well, 2.8 is the item which was on recommendation 1 that we're going to look at and is going to be discussed in the adjournment.
Okay, right. Before we move to an adjournment, are there any other comments that anyone wishes to make in relation to the overall report? Councillor Efti.
I think hopefully if we vote to approve this report, it'll be a good step forward in getting this building up and working.
I agree with that. Right, okay. I do want to sort of place on record my appreciation to everyone for the constructive debate that we've had for the last just over an hour on this. It's a worthwhile hour. Thank you to you, Councillor Wilson, and your colleagues. I think this is where we need to adjourn. Will 10 minutes do it? 10 minutes? Officers reckon they can do it in 5. Well, it's an open-ended adjournment, but 5 minutes. But if we need to extend it to get the job done properly, I don't want this rushed. But I'm going to ask officers, whoever they nominate, together with Councillor Ward and Councillor Wilson. I think a little huddle between you. I don't need to be involved in the recommendations. So we'll use that clock up there. So let's call it 20 to 9. We'll reconvene at 8:45. Meeting adjourned for the present time. Yeah, love one, please. Thanks. You're right. You okay? All right. Yeah. Right, Sonia?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah. So sorry, that's okay. It's come to my attention that one of my clients, who is also my brother-in-law, has helped design the cabin. I just found out. So I don't know. Yeah, and obviously because they're my client, my brother-in-law, even he's my brother-in-law, making pay for me. So that I don't know if you could have a think about that. And they're now doing work for the council as well, particularly in the cultural entry. Yeah, so that's my brother-in-law. Charles. Peter's my brother-in-law. So if they're doing that, I don't know how, what, or where. It's probably if you just... I do. Well, I don't know because I benefit from being paid by them. So not by the work they do? No. Well, no, if they don't get paid, I don't get paid in that sense. Okay. So yes, I don't know. It's probably a non-peculiar, but if I get on an email, because it possibly been meeting by meeting, I might not know. Because I don't know their individual contracts necessarily. Well, it sounds like you've met them. Yeah, of course, it sounds yeah. Yeah, just in case, I'd like to be correct on everything. Yeah. I do the accounts. I'm their accountant, so they pay me. It's probably non-peculiar. Some people could think we get paid by them. That's all. Yeah. You don't benefit from if they do work, you pay more. You just get paid at the. Well, if they do lots of work, I might. Oh no, you might. Yes. Yeah. Very indirectly. Essentially, yes. That's all. Yeah. No, no. I would imagine it's. I just not volume. No, but so it's probably non-peculiar. Have a look. We'll drop it down. I'll drop you an email. But it's just because I won't necessarily know if they're doing work in a meeting or not here.
Right, members and members of the public, if we can reconvene, please. Oh, Richard Lambert of Pratney. Richard Lambert of Pratney. I just showed him up in front of other people. He said, "Oh, who was in charge when this building was signed?" It was Conservatives. I said, "If you're always going to degenerate it into a political." Do you know where we're going? Yes. Who's going to be reading them out? Right. Okay. Okay.
What's been, because in effect we accepted to one of the amendments.
Okay.
And then it's going to be amendments to the ones in the report itself.
Right. Reconvening the meeting at 12 minutes to 9 by that clock, so overran slightly with the adjournment. But right, thank you for work that has been done in the interval. I'm told that this is a double act between officers and the strategic portfolio holder for planning and assets. You're going to get through these recommendations. So, Emily, do I look to you first of all?
Yes, please, Chairman. So I've got the amendments to the recommendations in the report. To recommendation 2.1, we will insert the word mill in between the and hall. So it will read the mill hall. In recommendation 2.2,
right, shall we? Right, I'm just trying to think, because shall we read out and just as we go take them one at a time? Because they've got to be read out, haven't they?
Chairman, if you're happy to accept the amendments that I'm repeating,
yeah, just a small
then
point.
you can take them on block.
Okay, right. Right, are we happy to take the amendment? Right, okay. And Councillor Wilson, for the purposes of this, I just want you to be happy as well on behalf of your committee, yeah? Okay, right.
Chairman, I probably should have said it at the end of me reading all these out, or reading the amendments out, you will need to have them proposed and seconded before you go to the vote.
But you're happy for us to do that, or the committee are happy for us to do that en bloc? Yeah? Okay.
Thank you. So recommendation 2.2 is to insert the words up to ahead of the sum of £248,950. There is no change to recommendation 2.3. In 2.4, there are two typographical corrections. One is to add a 0 to make the value £45,000, and the second is to add the word in between investment and furniture, so it reads investment in furniture.
Happy with those, except you need to remove the comma as well, being really pedantic, and replace it with a full stop, so that it actually reads 45,000 in the conventional sense. Yeah.
In recommendation 2.5, we will insert the words and undertaking meaningful market research after the word stakeholders. So that will now read, this allocation of budget will look to focus on resident assessment needs, engaging with all stakeholders and undertaking meaningful market research to collate all data to formulate a proposed investment design, etc., etc.
Agreed, and you're happy, Councillor Wilson? Good. Okay.
Recommendation 2.6 is unchanged, as is 2.7. And then in 2.8, it is simply to replace the words overview and scrutiny committee with full council.
Agreed. So,
Chairman, there are also the 3 recommendations from the overview and scrutiny committee
so it comes
that
down
you
to
want to take forward.
comes down to 3 now, does it? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
So those are recommendations 1, 3 and 5. And Chairman, in recommendation 3, there is an amendment to change the word steer to support.
Right. Members, are we happy with those amendments? Councillor Wilson? Yeah? Okay. Right. So we've got a set of recommendations before us with amendments. Do I have a proposer for those? Councillor Ward, thank you.
I'm proposing.
Do you have a seconder? Councillor Spearing is...
I'd be pleased to second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Right. Do we have to read them all out again? Or can we take them as written? Okay. Members, are you happy for us to take them en bloc? Right. Okay. So if we're taking them en bloc, members, can I have a show of hands of that for those in favour of the recommendations? That is unanimous. And a very sincere thank you to everyone that has played their part in bringing that together, the ONS committee and members here tonight. I think that's been a really useful time. Thank you also to officers that have brought all the information together as well. So that's good. Moving on, you're not quite released yet, Councillor Wilson, because you've got the second report, and I think this will be a jolly sight easier, but I think you're introducing the report from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the One Team Transformation Programme.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the committee were pleased to note the progress that's been made to date, and in particular the management of risks which are going in the right direction, and gives us greater confidence that the programme will be successful.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, and I will take that as a reflection of me proposing the report last week at your meeting. So we managed to get through any questions there, and again, thank you for your committee's support on that. Members, in terms of the recommendation there, is that noted? Right. We turn to item 7, which is Quarter 3 2022-23 Financial Management and Performance Update Report. And I think I turn to Councillor Mrs Danielle Belton to introduce the report, please.
Thank you. So this is just a report for noting, and I trust members have all read the report. But essentially, what we're reporting on here is the Quarter 3 2022-2023 revenue budget and capital position as set out in sections 3 and 4 and detailed in appendices 1 to 4. This was pushed back a month, you'll all recall, at request of our interim 151 officer, Tim, due to budget restraints, resourcing and so on and so forth, which we agreed it is just a report for noting. There's a small underspend to note, but essentially all the information is in the report. It's a matter of fact and it's just there for members to digest.
Members, any questions on that update? Thank you very much.
I have no Tim.
Okay. Right. So we turn to the recommendations as set out in paragraph 1.1. Do I need to read those out or can they be taken?
No, it's just a note.
Right. All those recommendations are in fact for noting and, sorry, there's just one recommendation, wasn't there, for noting, so I get ahead of myself. Thank you very much. And we turn now to item 8, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund process for distributing the future funding. Councillor Mrs Belton, it seems to be your roadshow tonight, so let's go over to you, please.
I've lost the crowd though, disappointingly. Never mind. So, we've got 3 recommendations in this report for the Shared Prosperity Fund 2023-24 allocation. So the 3 recommendations are that the authority be delegated to the Strategic Director and Director of Place in consultation with the portfolio holder for Finance, Economy and Climate to operate a grant programme to distribute up to 70% of the Council's 23-24 UK Shared Prosperity Fund allocation in line with the principles set out in the report. I'll go through the recommendations quickly and then I'll overlap on the report. So recommendation 2, authority be delegated to the same people to utilise the remaining proportion of the Council's 23-24 Shared Prosperity Fund allocation to directly commission projects. And lastly, that those same people are delegated responsibility to amend where necessary some of the principles within the report. So what we're asking for here essentially is in the second year of our UK Shared Prosperity Fund, there's just over £150,000 as set out in the report, split over 3 separate pots essentially, 3 separate interventions. And the suggestion is for intervention 1 and 4, that up to 70% of that fund is made available for grants for people like community groups, parish councils, so on and so forth. So the works that have been undertaken to date, a partnership group met last week, which engaged those people to discuss potential options, and an all-member briefing has been set up for tomorrow for members of the council to engage and discuss also. Work has already been delivered under the first financial year. Dan Goodman has turned it round in record time and has been able to commission deep clean of town centres, something that lots of members were quite passionate about, and those are taking place on Sundays through March. We have an art project to celebrate the King's coronation, a tourism enhancement project, supports of art trails, grants towards a community church, a business breakfast and lots of other bits and pieces. So Dan's done a great job to ensure that money is spent and is spent right across the district on community projects. And what we're asking for now is the delegation to be able to do the same again, plus setting up the grants for year 2.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Belton, any members wish to make any comments? Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. I really do support this initiative. It is going to be so important for our towns and villages going forward to be able to support them in so many different ways. I think this is a fantastic way of showing we care for our residents. Thank you for all your hard work, Daniel and Daniel. Fantastic job. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ward. I should have welcomed Daniel Goodman to the meeting. I know he was here as a support act. So far, he's had a fairly light evening of it. We haven't come up with too many difficult questions for you. But did you want to add anything, Daniel? No? Okay. Right, any other questions? Okay. Now, there's 3 recommendations. Did you read out 1.3?
Summarised it.
Did you? Is that good enough? That's, I'm getting the nod that that's good enough. It's set out in the report. It's there for everyone to see. Clearly, we need to vote, but do you have a seconder for those? I assume that you're proposing them. Councillor Efty. I know you spoke a strong speech, Councillor Ward, in support, but I'll give Councillor Efty a turn if that's all right. Okay. Are you happy to take those recommendations en bloc? Agreed on that. And can I ask you to raise your hands if you're in favour of those recommendations? That is unanimous. Good. Thank you very much indeed, members. If we now turn to the final item on the agenda for this evening, and that is to turn to year in review update. And we're going to be looking at a presentation, except I gather the presentation is on good old-fashioned paper because we haven't got a projector here tonight. But I did ask for these to be produced. Have visiting members got copies? Yep. Okay, lovely. Okay, right, good. So, am I introducing this? Yeah, that's a nod, isn't it? Right, okay. Before you is a set of slides, members, and I want to just remind you, because I think this is a really good and positive item that this whole council can be really proud of in terms of what has actually happened. There is a bit of a tendency when we move on through the year, jobs get done, job done, ticked, and it's in the past. And what this is really an opportunity to reflect. Everything that we do is against the business plan, of which you should all be familiar, and outcomes in relation to our objectives by 2023. It was a 3-year business plan. Last year, an annual review was produced, a nice glossy, celebrating successes, but I'm pleased to say that much more this year has been achieved even than last year, and we published Rochford District Matters. That has gone out to every address because not everyone wakes up in the morning and turns on their computer and checks to sort of see what Rochford District Council is doing. So some people really prefer a paper copy, other people sort of say, why waste paper? So you have to get the balance on these things. But what we have before us is a set of slides. And I think if everyone is prepared, we're going to go through those slides, portfolio holder by portfolio holder. We won't make it too long drawn out, but just pick out the highlights. But if we look at page 1, for example, you know, through the last year, 13 months, we have been putting through the One Team partnership with Brentwood Borough Council. If you look at the putting in the structures, preparing the job descriptions and dealing with all the HR side of putting in the leadership team, it has been at a phenomenal pace. To have achieved what we've done in 13 months is nothing short of phenomenal. And I thank officers for how they've navigated their way through that. We do still have 3 director appointments to make, substantive appointments, because 3 of our appointments at the moment are interim appointments. But that has been put together. There are further interviews planned for next week, but there has always been a policy by this executive to make sure that you know, we recruit high caliber people for the positions that we're demanding across the 2 districts. The other thing that we're very aware of is to make sure that we have a process for career development so that we don't always resort to external recruitment. And that is having launched the Aspiring Managers Programme to grow our own from within. You know, it is important that officers feel valued. There's a clear mentoring development programme, and that has been launched. We delivered a balanced budget a few weeks ago, and I've got to say for this council, it must be the envy. I listened on the news this morning to how many councils are having to cut services to balance their budget. And when I look, you know, budget is an interesting one because you're not going to get everyone always to agree, but we should be proud collectively across all 39 councillors of what we've actually achieved and what we're delivering. No cuts to services, no subsidies from reserves, our leisure facilities preserved, cleaning and greening, no loans, no debt, community grants and an attractive programme of capital investment across the district. You know, that is something for us all to be very, very proud of, and you know, we have stability there. If I turn to Acela, you'll see the City Fibre installing £25 million worth of full fibre-enabled internet services. That links into Acela. We've strengthened the Acela partnership. There's much better financial accountability, governance through a joint committee, defined work streams, but not set so much that we're not blind to the fact that the world within local government, the devolution agenda is coming down the tracks, and we have to make sure that within Acela we're flexible to do that. We invest £60,000 a year in the Acela partnership, and that's a partnership with the 6 South Essex authorities together with Essex making up the 7th. Huge commitment by Essex. But just if we look, sometimes it's difficult to quantify the return that we're getting there, but I can tell you that Acela has had £6.9 million of grants to develop just one strand of what it's all about, which is Acela Digital across the district. You know, and that involves going across boundary, Castle Point, Basildon, you know, other, but you know, £6.9 million has come from grants to enable us to distribute fibre in the district. And if I look back at July 2021, just 8.1% of our district was covered with fibre connectivity. If I look, and we were 7th out of 8, I think it was, certainly we were low down the league. If I look as at today, we pulled up the league, we're about 3rd with 49.16%, those are the latest published figures, of our district being covered with fibre availability. And we have now, as a district, overtaken the Essex and the England average, which sits at the mid-40s, 40%. So, you know, that is an achievement for our district. I know it's inconvenient when you see roads being dug up and tracks being put in, but residents and businesses are crying out for digital. Acela has been a deliverer of that to public buildings through that grant. So £60,000 per year investment on that work stream alone, and I wanted to sort of really emphasise it. That is what this council and Acela is delivering. I just want to finish off by talking about the Connect programme. In 2020, early 2020, there was a commitment to invest nearly £500,000 in updating and transforming our services. And obviously that programme was built around a payback over time in terms of efficiency, cost benefits, and as at current time in broad terms, we're about £350,000 spent into that programme, and that is delivering huge benefits. I think the last time I looked at the figures, we could quantify the return and ongoing benefits of £177,000. This is about modernising our services, modernising our systems, investment in IT, investment in our workforce and systems to support it. So I think that covers off the main headings on 1. Sounds as if I've got a question. Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Not a question, just to agree everything you've said, Chairman. I think we should be proud as a council of what's gone on. For me, the balanced budget delivery was excellent. I've spoken to many other councils recently and many other councillors who absolutely they're envious of our budget. We just got to look around us and see how many councils are up to the rising debt. and I think we should be extremely proud. I know I am, and I'm proud to be a councillor of this council, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Rowe. Right, enough. Yeah, that was a double act, wasn't it, on the front page? So there we are. We move on to finance, economy and climate. Councillor Mrs. Danielle Belton, did you want to comment at all?
Thank you. Yeah, just to say that when I was made portfolio holder initially for climate and economy, finance has been added, but you've both ably covered the pros off there. I was asked to work on raising the profile of businesses in our district and also highlighting the climate issues that we're facing and doing some good work to achieve that. And for me, getting a robust sustainability strategy approved has been a big tick in the box, because out of that already we've set up a climate forum with parishes all across the district so that we're not duplicating work and duplicating resources, we're working together. We have an EV strategy session coming up for stakeholders. We surveyed over 2,000 people in the district to find out what they wanted. We've launched REBA, which has the best part of 200 businesses now signed up, all of whom are committed to reducing their carbon footprint. And we have the Climate Committee established. So where climate is concerned, I think we've made some leaps forward and will continue to do the work to hit our ambitious carbon neutral target for the council, but also bigger picture for the district. And then going on to economy and businesses, there's been massive amount of work done with businesses, namely Daniel and Paula, working with them to really highlight them. The Business Awards, absolutely fantastic and something that we should all be proud of being involved in, and I look forward to seeing more of them in the future. We've delivered multiple one-on-one packages to new businesses, helping them to grow and develop. We've held one, but another one's coming, business breakfast with multiple attendees and really great feedback. We're reaching just under 2,500 or just around 2,500 businesses every week with our Tell Me More business bulletins that go out. A 7.7 rise in subscription over the last 12 months is enormous, and that is testament to the work that Paula and Dan do to reach those businesses and support them, working with the likes of the Chamber of Trade. And then obviously, as we've alluded to and spoke about this evening, we've got the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. The team got together an investment plan in record time. We've got our £1 million and we will deliver that for the community. So I'm proud of what we've all achieved over the last 12 months, and thanks to the officers that have given me the support to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Belton. Councillor Rowe.
Sorry, Chairman, you'll get sick of my voice now. So I've been to the Chamber of Trade meeting tonight, and there was nothing but compliments for us as a council, for Dan and Paula, in fact for all of us in general. So I just want that minuted. Thank you.
Thank you, that's nice to hear. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay. We go to Councillor FT, who will talk to us about customer services, legal, IT, leisure and tourism.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I've got the longest title there, so I think in the future I'll just have portfolio holder put on there, save swapping cards. But first, thank you's got to go to our staff. We're at the top here, we're the public face a lot of the time of the council, and everybody underneath, our staff are what makes us to deliver these great things that we've been delivering. As Councillor Wotton alluded to, we've got our new Watchford District Matters out, which we got out pretty quickly, and I think it's a really good publication. Thanks, Greg, for organising that with Anna and Martin. That's really great. We've got some, I think we get quite a lot of times we wonder where the 106 money goes when we get developments in the district, and we're actually getting some football pitches, which is great. And tonight we've actually voted on getting customer services in the Mill Hall properly done. So that's something else which is really going to help in Rayleigh, I think. Should be really good. We've also looked at Gov Wi-Fi. Now, a lot of people won't know what Gov Wi-Fi is, but that is all the government buildings now. If you've got a council laptop, you don't have to put your passwords in. They all just, you walk in and they all should just work, which was a good bit of work to do. There's so many things even from what's on this one, I did ask for the most stuff, but I think housing has, Arthur Williams' portfolio has beat me just a little bit with 3 pages. But that's really good. We've got the self-service kiosks in reception, which people now don't have to make trips to. If you live in Maida, you don't have to go to South Street in Watchford. They can update all their digital information to officers, so that's really good. I think my thank you is to the staff to that's made all this really possible. So, any questions?
Thank you, Councillor Efti. No questions. Good presentation on your part. We move on to Councillor Sperring.
Thank you, Chairman. This time last year, I was having a lot of sleepless nights facing the prospect of our waste service with sewers coming to an end. And initially there were 14 expressions of interest. That dropped down to 9, that dropped down to 1. And the pricing was going up every time we had a conversation. This was the first time that I can recall our working relationship with Brentwood really kicked in. It was suggested that perhaps we should have a chat with this little outfit called Norse, who we'd never had experience of working with before. I think in the space of 2 weeks, Mr. Houghton supplied them with a lot of information. He and I went up to Norfolk, met the guys. We went through their MRF operation, which is the noisiest thing I've been in since I was in the ship's engine room. We then had about a 3.25-hour meeting with them. They told us their proposals, their ideas, and as we came out, we basically looked at each other and said, you know, we can work with these guys. If it hadn't have come off, not having your bins collected, streets cleaned, and all the rest of it would have been an absolute nightmare. I'd like to think that residents have not really noticed any change. From our point of view, Rochford North's management is vastly superior to anything we've experienced before. We've also had the benefit of using North's experience with other councils across the country. So if ideas are raised to us, we're not only just giving our own ideas, we're using their experience, and we have a terrific working relationship. So from that point of view, I'd like to congratulate everybody that was involved in that project and still is. Part of that, of course, was the investment in new vehicles, which have been ongoing. We are always open to further ideas of rechange and alterations, and that will be an ongoing scenario. Earlier in the year, we had the opportunity to celebrate Her Majesty the Queen's, then the Queen's Golden Green Canopy event, and we planted 70 native hornbeams in Cherry Orchard Country Park. We chose the hornbeams because from experience we realised that these trees are far more successful in surviving and growing, and the summer we had this year was quite tactful on everything we tried to do, but at the moment, as I'm aware, most, I think perhaps 2, are struggling. Everything else at the moment seems to have survived. We've continued our Parks for Nature policy, and so far have planted best part of 3,000 trees in 3 locations, and that will be ongoing later in the year, Chairman. We also worked with Essex Wildlife to improve the biodiversity of the lake in Cherry Orchard Country Park and the constant water flow that experiences. Big project, well done and very well received. Another area of investment has been in the Hockley Woods play space. If anybody's been up there, you know, I hope they're benefiting from it. I hope they also appreciate, although it comes under another category, the new car park that's also been invested, another 100,000, Chairman, and all the new fencing around there. We've also supported local economies by the free parking in the run-up to Christmas, which is almost standard now, but we did that. Probably last but not least, we have secured 186,000, our share of SEP money, which will secure projects across the district in the forthcoming year not least of all the Highway Rangers, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sperring. Any questions for Councillor Sperring before we move on? No? Okay. Councillor Williams, I can only say that with 3 pages, you're being quite greedy on this slide presentation, but lots going on under your portfolio. So if you want to give us a little bit of an account.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Right, Chairman, members, this report speaks for itself. I was a bit more surprised to see what we have actually achieved this year. It's incredible. It was easy with such a great team. What a fantastic review. Of course, these things don't just happen. There is an awful lot of hard work that goes on in the background. I'm especially proud of our response to the ongoing costs of living and the energy crisis, along with the very successful Warm Hubs initiative supported by RAVs. All of this at very, very short notice. This is a fantastic effort from our officers and their teams, and I would like to take this opportunity to personally thank them all. Thank you all. And of course to the previous portfolio holder, Councillor Mike Webb, who initiated some of these projects. I am proud to be a member of this executive and this council. And last but no means least, I'd like to thank, in her absence, Mr. Lilly. She's done a fantastic job in a very short space of time. So thank you all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. And finally, in terms of updates, Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, what I've got to say is firstly, wow, I had no idea until you actually see it all on paper exactly what a fantastic council this is. There's no doubt about it. But I'm also extremely disappointed that members of the public have decided to go and not even bother to listen to what is actually our great achievements in this year. And that disappoints me extremely. They have walked out after just listening to one event, which again, we can say, the Mill Hall is open, and I'm going to repeat it, Mill Hall is open. They put that on recording and they put it on Facebook, and yet they have decided to leave the meeting without listening to anything that we have done in this year on this review, which I believe is a fantastic achievement, which I have to praise all the fellow... we have one. Thank you. I acknowledge one, several other members, thank you, who are here. But those who were recording have left. I mean, as far as what strategic planning and assets have done, for me, assets was, how can I put it? I came late to the party on this one. I was given a Christmas present of assets to try and sort various things out. And, you know, as Dave said about Norse and waste collection, I think I've had a few very, very late nights in regards to trying sorting out the problems that we have actually finalised this evening, which is Mill Hall and how that's going to go forward, and I think that is fantastic. We, as far as planning is concerned, which people don't tend to take much notice of, per se, but we have actually approved 78% of the planning applications, as you've seen. Councillor Sperring did mention the 100,000 investment in Hockley Woods car park. We've had a 1 million investment in Clements Hall and Rayleigh Leisure Centre. The Civic Suite has been closed, and the relocation of the Citizens and Advice and RDC reception, as Councillor FD mentioned in his report, has now taken up residence in Mill Hall. Over 1,000 planning applications determined, and I think, you know, we tend to underestimate, we are very critical here in Rochford of our planning department, and I'm going to say that, but it is remarkable throughout the country. We have one of the best planning departments in the country. I know a lot of people don't particularly notice that, but it's a fact. We have delivered 456 new homes, and this is an important announcement in saying that this year, because I know people talk about we haven't got the infrastructure, there's too many homes, too many cars, but it is vitally important we actually have these homes coming through, basically because we have got a superb record of delivery, and that record is actually protecting this district from unwanted developments. And I think residents need to understand that there's more to planning than the things that they actually think about. We've had major employment growth approved for IPECO and the arterial park. We know it's been slow, and we know we've had COVID, we've had the pandemic and everything and the shutdown, and it's been difficult economically, but it is growing, and there are great opportunities that we can see on the horizon in conjunction with the airport and the work we are doing with them, which I think is important to highlight. We have got £675,000 committed from the Community Investment Plan, which is going directly to regeneration. And I think that's really the end point that we have to look at. We are growing, we are regenerating, and we are making this district even better. And so I have to say that I am so proud to be part of this administration that is forward-thinking and is able to bring forward its vision and its plans efficiently and with fiscal prudence. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Any questions of Councillor Ward? Okay, right. So in conclusion, I'll sort of wrap things up. Thank you very much indeed for your various presentations. I think the slides are excellent. If I go through leisure, you know, 2 excellent leisure centres that we have here. Refuse cleaning and greening. These are the things that are the bread and butter services, but if they go wrong, they're the things that get all the attention. Our business engagement this year, the launch of REBA. The grant system that we do, Citizens Advice, RAVs come to immediately to mind, but there's others that we support. Our responsible approach towards climate change. The work that our revenues and benefits people do day in and day out. Supporting those in hardship, particularly addressing the cost of living. We have been noted as an authority that is ahead with what we're actually doing to support our residents and those in particular hardship and the schemes, which we launched in our budget and we didn't get universal support for. Our approach towards community safety, £120,000 this year to deliver what we hope will be a CCTV programme in Rayleigh and supporting community safety. This is what allows people to walk around our streets and hopefully feel safer. They should feel safe. And within a district council that has an overall budget of about £12 million, we punch way above our weight. It is a great shame that the good work that we do is sometimes eclipsed by other issues which, though important, are whipped up normally on social media to a disproportionate level, instead of flaunting the huge successes that our officers do day in and day out to support us councillors, and I'm actually talking about all 39. And I think it is a shame, while social media is good in many respects, it allows those people that want to be the minority voice to have a disproportionate voice in bringing some of these things down. But certainly I want to pay tribute to our officer team. You know, not everything goes wonderfully well, but a lot does go very well. But under the 80-20 rule, we often end up by talking about the 20% not going quite so well versus the 80% that's going extremely well. So I want to thank you for your attendance tonight. Thank you for what you do day in and day out and the success of this authority. And I want to thank members here tonight. Thank visiting members who've stayed the course. Thank Councillor Wilson for the constructive contribution from ONS and to enable us to come up with what I think are some really helpful recommendations to move the the Mill Hall Arts and Events Centre. There is no desire at all to want to be destructive in the process. Quite the reverse. We actually want to see this place be a success. And certainly from discussions that I've had with certain members who've visited other places, I've indeed been to other places, we're confident that we can make this place a jewel in the crown. We accept that it's been a difficult pathway, but I would just like to see some more positive media in the social media world. But for our part, thank you very much indeed to everyone. Thank you. And with that, well, we use that clock again, 9:30, this meeting is closed. Thank you very much indeed.